interest in this topic is very, very good for our community, and I appreciate you all coming out and taking the time to hear what Dr. Coughlin has to say. Specifically, I would like to thank our clients, my associates, Brandy Winship and Maya Winter, and I feel honored and blessed to serve so many great clients, even multiple generations, and we do not take lightly the trust that you've placed in us. Thank you very much. Additionally, special welcome to our clients' friends and family who are here as guests today. Navigating longevity is a team sport, so thanks for playing. And lastly, but certainly not least, I want to thank Wisdom Tree ETFs for making it possible for Dr. Coughlin to come all the way from Boston to Victoria today to speak with us. It wouldn't be possible without their contribution, and great speakers and great creators of content are associated with Wisdom Tree, and without them and being involved in this, there would be no way that we could have done this. So thank you very much to them. So let's get on with this. I want to acknowledge a few things and maybe set the table for our conversation today, but retirement has changed, and over time it's changed a lot. And when we see what's going on in terms of healthcare and science and technology, the pace of change is actually quickening. And because retirement is changing, we really need to change our approach to it. The old way of dealing with it is probably not going to work for what we have coming up. And that's a big part of what we want to cover today. Let's, to get a little bit of perspective though, take a look back at the history of retirement, because it's fairly new. It's not something that's always been with us. In fact, it's only 129 years old. It was created in 1889 by Otto von Bismarck of Germany. He was the Chancellor of Germany at the time, and they were facing a little bit of a problem because they realized that they could have older, slower workers that could be plucked out of the system. And they replaced them with younger workers, but they had no solution for what to do with the older workers that they were taking out. And so what happened was, because by the way, up to then, all that happened is you worked and then you died. There was no retirement. There was no such thing. So what happened was Otto von Bismarck, by creating a pension for German workers that started at age 70, he essentially created a system that allowed people to be paid to not come to work anymore. And that was fantastic. And von Bismarck at the time, he was 74, but unfortunately the average German worker only lived to the ripe old age of 47. So not a lot of people were recipients and part of that system. And so it began though. Retirement was created. It was, work got a finish line, and it was based entirely on age. And in time, other countries followed suit. Here in Canada, our main government pension program, which is old age pension, got its start in 1927. We chose the same retirement age as the Germans did, age 70. And I think in Canada and in a lot of places around the world, just by virtue of the name of our pension, old age pension, retirement got associated with old age. And since those days, yes, agreeably, lifespans have gotten longer and retirement ages have gotten shorter, but virtually all retirement legislation and policy still uses age alone to determine participation and benefits. I want to ask everyone a question. If you're 65 or 62 or pick a number, can I predict who you are and what you're capable of by virtue of that number alone? How many of you will go along with that idea? Probably not many. But how many of you will go along with the idea that all 65-year-olds are the same and should be treated the same? Anyone? No, I don't think so. Well, ladies and gentlemen, age is still what we use to make assumptions about people and how they should act and what they're capable of. And we have to remember that retirement is a social construct that was developed in the industrial age with an industrial mindset that really no longer fits the age in which we live. It's an artificial finish line that has been imposed upon our lives. Let me ask everyone another question. Anyone here know any 80-year-olds who act like they're 50? Yeah. Anybody know any 50-year-olds who act like they're 80? Please don't point. Don't point at anybody. Don't point at me, please. Do you realize what we just acknowledged? We acknowledged that there is a difference between age and old. Age is a chronological marker that is traced forward from our date of birth. But old is an attitudinal marker. One does not become old until they decide to become old. And that's why we have 80-year-olds acting like they're 50 and 50-year-olds acting like they're 80. More and more research shows us that age itself is less of a limiting factor than our views on aging. Dr. Coughlin's work shows us the way to making post-work life an opportunity for productive and positive growth rather than a period of decline. In fact, Dr. Coughlin's research points out that traditional retirement planning is out, and what we should replace it with is navigating longevity. So in practical terms, what does it mean to navigate longevity? Well, I always think about the financial side, and to me it's really all about making sure that your wealth span lasts longer than your lifespan. That's the first thing. But that gives you the freedom to focus on your wellness so that you can get your health span as close as possible to your lifespan. And that's really kind of what it's about. Having enough income so that you can sleep well at night, and having enough purpose so you can get up in the morning. Dr. Coughlin's research and insight is resetting the agenda to how people consider improving life in retirement. Beyond sophistication lies simplicity, and it takes a very high intellect to take this complexity and turn it into actionable items that we can use, and Dr. Coughlin's going to do that today. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Dr. Joseph Coughlin to Victoria, BC.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Luke. And I also want you to know that Luke has actually been probably one of my better students. He's actually reading the stuff that I write and research. And you should really take pride in the fact that he's going beyond being a financial advisor and only speaking about money, because we are really speaking about money in a long period of our lives. You know, think about it. Retirement as we define it today is 1/3 of your adult life. And so what he's thinking about and what he's doing and hopefully guiding all of you is not just to live longer, but to live better. So with that really great introduction, I want you to know that we're going to have a little bit of fun this afternoon. I don't want this to be death by PowerPoint. You have to understand my day job is teaching, so class participation will be 10% of your grades today. You'll know when I go to ask. This is my recent book. If you like it, please tell your friends. If you don't like it, keep it to yourself, all right? So this is the disregard everything after hello slide that I have to put up there for regulatory purposes. But here's your first question. What are the two things we'd like to say we can depend upon in society? Okay, see this side of the room over here, they're awake. Do you need Starbucks? What's going on over here? Yes, death and taxes. You see, apparently, imagine this. Death, the funeral home industry is lamenting, which I think is the only word we can use, that they're actually losing sales. You see, we're not dying nearly at the rate that we once did. And as a result, frankly, they're losing sales and certain businesses are beginning to close, the funeral business of all things. Now, there's a whole body of literature out there called disruptive technology and disruptive change, written by a great scholar named Clay Christensen. He teaches at the it's the art school up the river from us. Oh yeah, Harvard, that's it. And Clay wrote a whole bunch of work basically saying that certain technologies come totally out of nowhere and blow away your business model. And just so you know, I live in Massachusetts, in Sudbury, Massachusetts, outside of Boston. And I'm about 4 miles from where Digital Computer was headquartered, where the then CEO of Digital Computer said, who the blankety blank would want to have a computer on their desk? Just so you know, the best pharmacy is sitting where his desk once was, basically. I want to suggest to you that demography is truly destiny. That demography, not just technology, can change how we live, how we play, how we work, and certainly business as well. And that's what I call the longevity economy. So what I want to do this afternoon with you is to talk a little bit about demography. You don't have to groan. I'm going to hopefully make it fun for you. Talk about a little bit about demography and how we're aging and the like. But then really get into, shall we say, the 7 different dimensions of aging, or shall we say, cashing in the longevity dividend to retire and live well. And we'll have a little bit of fun with it all along as we go along. Now, Luke was talking about life expectancy in 1900. You heard it. 47 years old. That's a whole new definition of midlife crisis if you think about it. Does anyone want to take a guess what the fastest growing part of the population is right now throughout the industrialized world? Any guesses? 85 plus. And then within that, 100 plus. Now I'm going to ask you to do a little history lesson with me. It's a short video. There's no audio. In 1800, look at this. Life expectancy was roughly in your 30s. As income goes up, however, we find that longevity goes up. So the best correlation, by the way, to living a long life is A, choosing your parents well, but secondly, the other part is education and income tend to correlate basically with living longer, typically better. So in 1800, I want you to look at this. The little tan, pukey, somewhat color here is the European countries, Americas in the yellow, Asia Pacific like China in the red, purple, Africa. But all these countries are generally clustered. The Europeans are out front. They're pretty much doing pretty well, and as well as some of the Americas in 1800. So we're going to roll tape, and what I want you to look at, and I want you to think of that history class that you took about what's going on. Think about what's happening in these different years. The Europeans are bouncing along. They're getting wealthier. Food's coming in from the New World. They're doing fine. Asia, not so much. You're seeing depression here. Now, we'll start thinking about what's going to happen now. We're about to hit Spanish flu, World War I. Ready? We're going to hit World War I. 1, 2, 3, drop. Look at the fertility rate. Soon, we're going to have flu. Then we're going to have World War II come. Watch. Drop. Now watch. China, almost like a football game, coming out of the background since the 1950s. India, coming up all the way coming up. They've gained 50 years of longevity in simply 60 years. And as they come up to about 210, everyone is moving in the right direction. Yes, Africa is dragging. Some of them, sadly, only in their 50s and 60s. But one of the things you have to think about is it's not just the United States, Canada, Europe, and certain Asian countries. That longevity is the new normal for many countries around the world. So does anyone want to know where to live? Whoop. Where we should all go, I guess, is Luxembourg and Singapore in particular. They've got lots of money, and they live a very long time. But you start to see where the clusters are up in that direction. So the whole longevity revolution, if you will, is something that's really happening in a very big way everywhere. But imagine this. Half the children born in the so-called rich world in 2007 are guesstimated to live over 100 years. Start thinking about what that might mean. Look at these numbers. Japan, 50% of the kids, 107. US, 104. Italy, 104. Germany, 102. Start thinking about what that means. 100 years of life. You know, this is not just about retirement. Longer life is going to start to call questions in about, for instance, not how many jobs will you have, how many careers will you have? Think about the things that have changed in just the last 5 to 10 years. No one ever heard of a data scientist 5 years ago. What the heck is a social media analyst? Why do we need a Zumba instructor? These are all things that just emerged out of nowhere. So it's no longer a question about what are you going to be when you grow up? How many things will you grow up to be? By the way, where will you live? There's some data that suggests, and the research I'm doing in my lab suggests, that you may move more times after age 50 than you did between 18 and 35. Will my wife of already 32 years want to hear the same jokes from me over and over again for the next 32 years? So really what we're talking about is longevity changing everything, not just about retirement, but how we live, work, and play. So yes, nations are getting older because we're living longer. But something else is going on. Something else we really did not anticipate. It's never happened in humankind before. We stopped having children. We just basically don't like kids. And I have a teenager if anyone needs a spare, trust me. No. Think of, just out of curiosity, does anyone want to share with me? It's still daylight, so we can keep it clean. What's the best form of birth control? Somebody back there said marriage. I don't know where you're going tonight. I don't know where you're going to go tonight. No, basically the best form of birth control is like longevity, education, and income. Because as it goes up, fertility drops right through the floor worldwide. How many of you remember the books that we had to put up with in middle school and high school? They were all written by descendants of Thomas Malthus. Remember Malthus? 200 years ago, he was the guy that said basically, oh my God, the population is going to go up. We don't have the carrying capacity. We're going to starve. Yeah, well, not so much. He's wrong. He didn't anticipate technology and the like. And his descendants are wrong as well, because remember the books we had to read? The population bomb, the population explosion. Guess what? Even the UN, who's not known for its optimism, is saying basically the population is going to go up, go up, go up, and by about 2050, 2060, guess what? Starting going down the other way. Now I'm going to get a little geeky on you for a moment. You need 2.1 children per female to keep a population even. We are now hitting what demographers call demographic winter. I like to call it birth dearth, where around the world, starting with the industrialized world, but is now going around the world, even in the developing economies, where we're starting to see birth rates drop well below replacement level, and even in nations that have a high fertility rate. The fertility rate is like 4 or 5 to 1 female, which is still outrageously high. But the fact of the matter is what we're seeing now is an entire world where the number of children is going down. Just to give you an idea, in Canada, 48% of the couples have no children. That's gone up by 4% in the last 5 years. We're seeing that in the United States. We're seeing that in the UK. We're seeing it elsewhere. And some countries are getting really nervous. Look at the Russians. They have now developed, you ready for this? Make a Patriot Day. If you can demonstrate that in October, you made a Patriot come June, you could win a refrigerator, a truck, even get a discount on your appliances. Because think about it, demography is destiny. Without people, where's your consumers? Who's going to do the work? Who's going to fuel the military? That's really the underpinning of economies. I know we like to talk about numbers, but it's numbers of people that power economies. Now, I don't know who can get this kind of research money. I wish I could. In Denmark, someone actually funded a study showing that apparently Danes have more sex outside of Denmark than they do inside the country. And so they created a whole advertising campaign for wannabe grandparents. You ready for this? You can see it. What's it say? Do it for Denmark. And wannabe grandparents send their kids to New York, Paris, London, go someplace. But please come back with a souvenir. The fact of the matter is, they're not producing. In Europe, United States, Canada, we're actually below replacement level. The only thing that is making both our countries on both sides of the border grow is immigration and first-generation immigrants who tend to have more children. Second generation, then they start dropping off in fertility rate as well. Around the world, essentially, everyone is getting older. So percentage-wise, in North America, we're looking at 1 in 4 of the population over age 60 very soon, over by 2025, which is right around the corner. And depending on the country, it can be anywhere from 30% to 40% of the population over age 60. Africa is still relatively young, as is parts of Asia, but the fact of the matter is all nations, as you saw on the map, are headed that way. Germany is great fun to work with. In fact, whenever I started doing research with them and BMW and Daimler and countries like that, whenever they see a problem, they see a chance for innovation, they are aging so quickly that they are now developing anti-aging beer, so at least we'll feel good as we get older. The fact of the matter is that they're having real challenges. There are entire parts of Germany, particularly in Bavaria, that are emptying out. This is happening in Japan. It's happening in Italy. By the way, it's happening in Nova Scotia. It's happening in upstate New York. It's happening in Maine. It's happening in Ontario as well, where the population is aging. Many people are moving, or they're basically just aging out. How about China? Did any of us believe that we would ever see in our lifetime a workforce shortage alert for China? Their one-child, one-family policy was, quote, so successful that their birth rate has gone right through the floor. And by the way, they relieved the one-child, one-family policy nearly 5 years ago. And so far, the answer of having children is, nah, not so much. No, it's not interested. But look at these numbers here. Strategic advantage. Think in terms of markets. Think in terms of foreign policy. 2012, Median age in China, 35. In the European Union, 41. Canada, 39. By 2050, an entire country in midlife crisis, 49. European Union, 52. Don't make the long game on Europe. And then finally, 43 here in Canada. But imagine this, the entire population of the United States is supposed to be roughly 400 million people by 2050. Look at these numbers here. Over 400 million Chinese over the age of 60. Essentially an entire United States country in retirement as we know it today within the country of China. And this will burn into your brain for the rest of the evening. In Japan, they are now selling more adult diapers than they are child diapers. Now, would anyone like to sum up for me the immigration policy of Japan in one word, please? No, just no is the answer, just no. And as a result, we essentially have a nursing home on an island where the population is roughly 127 million people, where their own government, very optimistic by the way, they were happy to report this not too many weeks ago, that they're saying that by 2050, we'll be still at about 85 million, where 40 to 45% of who is left over will be either 60 or 65, depending on whose numbers you're looking at. They are facing a crisis. Again, not only who's going to make the products and who's going to buy the products, who's going to keep the economy going, who's going to provide the care. You're seeing in Japan an incredible amount of innovation in robotics because, frankly, they don't have anyone to provide the care, so they're actually starting to develop robotic ideas and concepts to have people taken care of, company, and the like. Here in Canada, we'll just take a look at this. Now, you should know that a good chunk of my family is from Ontario. I'm one of those families that has one half on one side of the St. Lawrence Seaway and one on the other half. One of the things that's really interesting, 65 to 69 is the fastest growing age group in Canada. Does anyone want to take a guess, though, however, which year has the most Canadians born? 1952? A little bit. It must have been I'll give you a hint. It must have been a really cold winter in 1960. My year. 1961. Apparently something was really going on the lake that year. I don't know. How about this? The baby boomers, you know, that group of us that were born between 1946 and 64, perhaps the largest and indeed the loudest generation to date so far. But imagine this, 45 Canadians are turning 72 roughly every hour. Just think about what that means. Essentially, I want to show that kind of goofy picture, not just to make you chuckle, but I want to ask you, do you really think that we are going to be as polite and as patient as our parents before us? The fact of the matter is, we're going to expect a pill, a policy, a product, or something that's going to drive markets that we're going to expect to not just live longer, we're going to expect to live better. Here's a number I want you to think about, talking about the birth dearth. 2047. I know it sounds way off. But by 2047, there will be more people in the world, not just in North America, in the world over age 60 than there will be children under the age of 15. And you say, wow, that's way in the future, and hopefully you consider that to be really startling. Well, anyone want to look at that year? That's the year that already happened in Canada. The fact of the matter is our birth rate, our demography and the like is profoundly changing our profile as nations, as countries, as societies in general. But if we're going to live that long, I say we live well. You know, this whole well-being thing can get pushed a little too hard. We got to live longer and better. You know, I always like people to say, you know, you should eat this, you should eat well. You know, there's a fine line between living longer and just making it feel that way, depending on what's in front of you. So what I want to go through and to talk to you about is how do we cash in that longevity dividend? How do we have a little bit of fun and live a longer life as well? And so just, you don't have to read the lines there, but there are a number of dimensions in well-being. You know, quite often we're always hung up on the physical. And yes, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything else. But there's many different dimensions. So there's the physical. How do you feel? Chronic conditions. Emotional. Have you ever thought about this? Did you tell a joke today? Did you hear a joke? Did you smile? We're doing a survey of 500 people every single day with Gallup for the last 8 years. We're measuring people's well-being in terms of physical, emotional. Do you have access to the things that you need as well as the things that you want? By the way, the question I really enjoy is, how do you think life is today, your life evaluation? And then how do you think it's going to be tomorrow? There are cultural differences. North Americans and the Brits and the Germans, I can give you a little idea. If you ask the Germans, how's life today? What do you think they're going to answer? The answer is, it's okay. Not great, but it's okay. How about in 5 years? It's probably going to be either the same or worse. Then you ask the Brits, how do you think today is? It's okay. How about tomorrow? Probably be the same. Come to North America, how's today? Not bad. How about in 5 years? Oh, in 5 years, it's going to be great. And that really changes how we think about retirement and longer life and the like. And in fact, I'm going to show you something you always knew intuitive. If you look across all age groups from 18 to 85, and you ask them, where do you put yourself on a well-being ladder, where the higher you up on the ladder, the higher your well-being on physical, emotional, life evaluation, and like, we can kind of tell the story that we know as we watch our children and ourselves. Life at 18 is really good. You've got someone else's credit card, you sleep late, there's no problem. Then look at this. Someone had the sheer gall and audacity to say that you had to be to work before noon. Life takes a drop at 21. And then finally you get into it and life is kind of okay. And then what happens? Children. Look at this. The lowest point of well-being, look out over the age groups here, the lowest part of well-being is from roughly 37 to 57. Why would that be? Everybody wants a piece of you. That's why the kids are no longer cute. They're teenagers. Nothing cute about that. Elderly parents need your help. The community wants you to engage. Your boss just gave you the weekend off and then changed it because you've got a project due. And everything that you're supposed to be doing is all about you at that point. There is no other time. But now watch what happens. Starting at about 60, 70, look at life evaluation. Things are going up. You're on more meds, your kids don't talk to you, you've just gotten divorced, and your doctor's saying you got 5 chronic conditions, but life is pretty good. So I'm going to give you, by the way, it does look like she's giving us the finger, doesn't it? And I think after a certain age, we're obligated to do that. So I want to ask you to think about 7 different questions. This is not going to be a test, but 7 different things for you to think about in terms of what retirement is going to be about, or how to think about planning well, or as Luke was saying, navigating longevity. This isn't about retirement. Retirement's made up. This is about your quality of life no matter what your age is. So let's have a little bit of fun here. What do you plan to do in your retirement years? So we've been asking around North America, throughout Canada and the US, people on the street, we've had students in different universities from Nova Scotia to UCLA and of course Cambridge and the like, go up to people and annoy the hell out of them and say, here's a sticky, would you tell me what you think, 2, 3 things you're going to do in retirement? Give me your zip code and I'll put down the gender. And we've been collecting thousands of these stickers. So what's the number one thing people say they're going to be doing? Travel? Yeah, that's number 2. Number 1? Sleep in. I like that. Where was that? No, the answer is, believe it or not, work. By the way, we're going to come back to this. Will all the men in the room please raise your hand? Basically, you should just leave now. This is not going to end well for you. Women talk a lot about what they're going to be doing, but in no cases do they ever talk about doing it with their husband. But we'll come back in a minute. So I want you to look at this. This is Canadian data from Stats Canada and Benefits Canada. 35% of Canadian boomers now expect to work full-time after 66. 15% of Canadians never plan to retire. That's pretty good compared to the United States, where 30% say they never plan to retire, or the way they put it in the AARP survey, they plan to work until they drop, and another 40% say they plan to work well past age 70. The fact of the matter is that we need to keep working, not just because of the money. That's the easy stuff to think about why we should keep working. But it's about meaning, it's about social connectivity, and having a reason to get up in the morning is the biggest reason. Think about this. What does a man ask another man typically after I know your name? What do you do? And about 6 months after not doing anything, you kind of look at your shoes a lot, and then you look at your spouse and go, so what do we do? And she looks back and goes, I don't know what you do, but I no longer do it with you. Let me introduce you to somebody I met just by pure chance as I was doing interviews on retirement. This is Joe, not my namesake. His name was genuinely Joe. And by the way, that's Sam the dog, a little kind of dachshund who had an attitude there. But he was my Uber driver. He was taking me to a series of focus groups I was going to be doing in Florida on the future of retirement. And I saw the Red Sox hat, and I said, gee, Joe, by some chance are you from Boston? And his answer was, oh yeah, I'm from Boston, retired here about 5 years ago. The wife and I retired down here. I sold a real estate company for $16 million. And I'm thinking maybe I should be getting up front to drive him, is what I was basically thinking. And so being nosy and studying retirement, he was very talkative, and we were in traffic, and I said, well, sir, why are you driving Uber? He says, well, I like to drive Uber, and it really fills a need. And I said, extra cash? Or he said, no. He says, do you know what Sam and I and the wife do every single morning? I said, no, sir. Sam and I walk the beach with the wife 2 miles up the beach every single day. And we waved all the nice people. And then do you know what we do? No. And by the way, I couldn't get out of my head the idea of a dachshund with short legs going up sand dunes. Just an image there. I said, no, so what do you do? He says, we walk the other way 2.5 miles and we wave to the same damn people all over again. If I don't get out of the house, and this is a phrase that apparently has been around a lot longer than I have, but I just got caught up on it, is that the wife married me for life, but not for lunch. And the fact of the matter is that just getting out and having a reason to do something, to talk to other people. So for him, it was not about the money or anything else. It was just having a reason to have more exposure to other people. And Sam the dog, who, as you can tell, was not happy that I was taking the picture. And talking about transition, retirement now is going to be a period of transitions. It's not going to be simply about either on Friday you're working and on Monday you're retired. Look at these data. 26% of workers globally plan to semi-retire. Think about what that means. Some of us are fortunate to consult. By the way, the second largest group of people starting new businesses are over age 50. It is no longer about little, 20-something-year-olds writing software in their hoodies and sneakers. 45% of Canadians plan to semi-retire before they stop work altogether. And of course, the 15% never plan to stop. How about this? Think about going back to school. Do you know that across North America and in Singapore and in the UK, the fastest growing group of people going back to college are people over age 60? In fact, in Canada, 60,000 Canadians are going back to school, by the way, in programs. Not just to take the art history course their parents wouldn't pay for, but literally taking certificate programs and degrees. So I'll give you an example. In Halifax, there are 6 or 7 universities right around that town, and they're actually putting together entire degree programs for a burgeoning retirement population there, for people who want to start new companies, for people who want to make the business case to stay in the workplace, or frankly, for those who just want to expand their overall horizons. Second question for you, how will you manage your health? Think about this. On average, just to give you North American numbers in gross numbers, 30 million of us have at least one chronic condition. 60 million of us have 2. And you ready for this? 75 million win the lottery and have 5 chronic conditions. Asthma, allergies, hypertension, diabetes, whatever it might be. The challenge will be in retirement or in longer life, how will you be ill, because with those conditions you're ill, but not so sick that you can't do the things you want to do, whether it's walking Sam the dog or driving Uber or frankly just getting up in the morning to do the things that you want to do. Imagine the following though. Stats Canada is now looking at basically millions of people with full-time chronic conditions, but we're now looking at a whole new range of technologies to manage those chronic conditions. But here's the kicker. Whether you're south of the border with private insurance or north of the border with public insurance, the newest technologies and newest services that are out there to manage those diseases will not be covered. So I'll give you an example of one device that I really don't like just because I have a number of vices, and one of them is making Ghirardelli fudge brownies, and I actually add more chocolate and sugar to the recipe. This spoon will measure the fat, the viscosity, and the sugar I put in my mix, and then upload that to a nutritionist, my wife, or to my doctor in terms of what I should or should not be eating. By the way, this little thing here, how many of you have an Apple Watch or Fitbit or something like that? Yeah, we're all kind of cool. We got our wearables, we're living the quantified life, which is kind of close to being the paranoid life, and you're doing all that. Well, wearables are getting to be so yesterday, because guess what? Implantables are coming real fast. We've already been doing it with animals. My cousins that run dairy farms outside in Ontario, outside of Kingston and whatnot, basically they put implantables in the cows. Guess what? People are already now getting glucose monitors and the like implanted under their skin to talk to their cell phone to record that information in general. And yeah, wearables are here. By the way, this lady actually designs wearables for older adults, making them fun and cool. Philips has licensed this technology from MIT. It is a mirror where basically every morning you can do your makeup or fix your hair, which I don't have to do as much anymore, but basically getting a checkup a day on the mirror by looking at capillary changes, looking at eye changes, skin color, and the like, so that we start to have more proactive technologies in our lives. So for instance, the technology I always love to make fun of is the personal emergency response services, the help I've fallen, can't get up technology. Great technology, you should absolutely have it if you need it. But the fact of the matter is, once I've fallen, it's a little late. So what we're starting to see now are technologies are going to be installed in your house that are going to show that there's sensors under the rug that say, gee, Joe's gait has changed a little bit. He's shuffling. He's likely to fall. Now's the time to intervene before he actually falls. I like this one. I named my dog 5 miles so I can say I walk 5 miles every day. You know, this technology thing's only so much. By the way, you think that's hard? This is Mr. Cupcake, my daughter's cat. Have you ever tried putting a bow tie on a cat? Now that's exercise. How about number 3? Where will you live? And I want to really thank Luke and my friends at Wisdom Tree for inviting me here, because I've never been here. This is a beautiful city, so thank you for having me for a few hours here. Where you're going to live is a major challenge in terms of the context of how well you live. So there's all kinds of discussions out there, people retiring to beaches and golf courses and the like. And the fact of the matter is that, frankly, only 8% of the population ever did that. And when one of the couple got sick or worse, they ricocheted right back to, no matter how cold and snowy and gross it was, back to where the older adult children typically were. So where are people retiring now? Oh, but I'm going to go back to a second. I'm going to tease my friends in the financial services industry. What's the new thing we're all going to be doing in retirement? You've seen somebody just said it. You know, you had the vision of walking the beach. We're always walking the beach. Or have you ever seen the same couple sitting on the beach facing the water? What are they talking about? They're just over and over, golfing. But now we're all going to be riding bikes on river walks near some places, apparently what we're going to be doing in retirement. But we're starting to see communities actually be redesigned, suburban communities where they're actually creating main streets and town centers to give the feel of places to walk and live. As we like to say in urban planning, places that have the intensity and density and accessibility, like this town that you live in here, that has lots of fun things just happening. So we're starting to find that for those who do move, they're moving to places like this. They're called naturally occurring retirement communities, like Victoria. The weather is good. You've got healthcare nearby, but also you've got lots of stores and things to do. You don't necessarily have to buy anything, but there's those activities. But the type of town that people are really gravitating toward, college towns. And I have to tell you, no one moves to Ann Arbor, Michigan for the weather. So why would you go to a college town? Well, think about it. Every September you get a few busloads of, shall we say, interesting characters showing up. You've got sports, typically you've got museums, you've got lots of cafes and restaurants. But what else does a major university town typically have? Medical school. So you've got really good health care nearby. So what we're starting to see are smaller towns like Victoria, populations that are in 80,000 to 150,000 are the new destinations. So all this discussion about people moving to the big city to retire, not really happening. In fact, if you look at United States numbers, big city numbers for older adults, they're actually moving out, and they're moving to cities that look a lot like the one that you're lucky to live in here. Number 4, who's going to change the light bulbs? Sounds like a really silly question, doesn't it? Well, you know, retirement planning could be about, do you have enough money to retire? Do you have independence? Do you have your objectives in retirement? But think about it. It's the little things you do every day that maintain your independence. Taking out the trash, changing the light bulbs. It's actually a real measure, if you will, of whether you've done comprehensive retirement planning. Not just about whether you can afford your house, but can you afford to maintain your house and have the services? Let me ask you a question. You don't have to answer in front of your friends and colleagues here. Do you have a list of people you would trust right now to come into your house or into the house with your spouse or partner there when they're alone? Do you have that person? If you do, that's real retirement planning. That's comprehensive planning for what's coming in the future. The cost of staying home, by the way, the maintenance on a house is typically 1% to 2% of its value. So the property rates here and in Toronto are going right through the roof, so are the maintenance costs associated with it. And around the world, there's something now called the village-to-village movement. Beacon Hill Village in Boston started this village-to-village movement where a number of people said, we do not want to move. We don't want to go to assisted living. We don't want to downsize. We want to stay here. So what they did is they formed cooperatives, basically saying, we're going to form a group of people to say, these are the folks we're going to hire to take out our trash, to change our light bulbs, to buy us theater tickets, to have the doctors come visit, so that we have a virtual assisted living in the community that we live in and we want to stay in today. And how about the fact that when we go to change our homes, when we go to remodel them to get rid of that god-awful avocado green that we put in the 1980s, we finally got tired of that? So it's not just about renewing the house, but remodeling the house so that you can stay there. So redoing a kitchen so that, God forbid, if you need a walker or a wheelchair, the aisle is wide enough that you can get in through the door and between the counters. That there's a countertop that's low enough where you can sit and chop vegetables. That cabinets are low enough that you can reach. This is not just planning ahead, and it does not mean an ugly kitchen. It does mean planning that, for instance, that if you ever need to have rehab, you can come home for rehab rather than going someplace else. It's inherently a financial decision, but it's also something you can do in a younger age while planning and rehabilitating the house in time. And, you know, all those services out there that we think are for the young kids, the so-called sharing economy, the Ubers, the Lyfts, the variety of home delivery services that are out there, we're finding in research that we're doing is that everyone across all ages are using them, but Ask for Task here in Canada, for instance, is great in terms of having someone change that light bulb or put together a piece of furniture or to paint the wall or whatever it might be. Amazon Home Services has a whole new set of services now throughout North America that where you don't just order the kitchen sink, they're actually delivering the kitchen sink with the plumber and installing it in real time. So really thinking about how these services are not just about a convenience and ease, but they form a virtual assisted support system as we age. My favorite, because it's my favorite food, it's a food group. How and where will you get an ice cream cone? Now, this probably sounds like the most inane question you could imagine. I think it's the most important question I've got on the deck. Why? Do you know the little things that make you smile? I don't mean, don't give me the stuff like, what am I going to do in retirement? I'm going to spend time with the grandchildren. Well, you know something? The grandchildren are going to get busy and they're going to have soccer practice and the like. You're not going to have much time with them. And frankly, they lose their cuteness after about 14 years old. It's not, it did go, yeah, I'm going to go on travel and take them to Disney. Okay, we're talking about punctuation points. We're not talking about life. You know, one of the things you should think about is that the typical retirement now is 8,000 days. Think about that. Let me put it in perspective for you. From 0 to 21 years old is about 8,000 days. From 21 to roughly 46, 47, you know, somewhat midlife crisis is 8,000 days. And from that period to roughly retirement age, about 65, 66, I bet you're getting the algorithm is 8,000 days. The fastest growing part of the population is over age 85. If you click over age 85 from typical retirement age, 8,000 days. That's a lot of Disney, and given the way I play golf, that's a sentence, not a retirement. The fact of the matter is what we need to think about is what are those little things? And again, I'm talking about real little. I'm talking about that first cup of coffee while reading the newspaper, getting an ice cream cone. And by the way, why did I pick getting an ice cream cone? Because transportation is the second cost in retirement, believe it or not, especially in Canada, because healthcare is taken care of. Transportation. Do you have access to the things that make you smile and the things you love? Not planning ahead, not calling a neighbor, not hoping an adult child will come by. Because frankly, here, let me put the little scenario for you. It's a hot July night. You hear the peepers out there. You want a soft serve ice cream, and you want it now. You don't plan ahead for that. You don't bother a neighbor for that. Do you have access to it by walking or driving? Whatever it is, that's part of retirement planning. And if you don't drive in North America and Australia and the UK in particular, and even parts of Germany, it's everything. People describe driving as about freedom and independence. And without it, the words that come out, handicapped, disabled. By the way, the average cost of owning and operating a vehicle in Canada is $9,500. And that's basically someone who does not drive hardly at all. Start thinking about fuel, the insurance, the maintenance, the purchase, and the like. But there are alternatives. Uber and Lyft and the like, not just for rides, but they deliver stuff too, from medications to foods and the like. How about Rent the Runway? Has everyone heard of Rent the Runway or Trove? This is kind of creepy for me. Rent the Runway, you can rent clothes, I say, on a Friday night, wear them on a Saturday night party, put them back in the box and send them back. Okay, I get that. It's like renting tuxedos. That's not novel. But Trove and Rent the Runway have a whole new business model. For a monthly fee, I think Trove is like $45 per month, they will send you a box of clothes. And you can wear them the entire month, don't even have to wash them. Put them back in the box, send them back, and you get your next box of clothes the next month. So things are, shall we say, changing, that the sharing economy and service economy is very different. Food, of course, can be delivered. That's old news. I know everyone thinks that's a novelty, but I guess no one ever met the milkman many years ago. But the fact of the matter is that now we're getting specialized meals and the like. These are all new costs of not just living well, but also living independently. How about your kitchen in your house? Do you know that your house, according to Samsung and Cisco and Google, by 2022, a few short years from now, the average home is going to have, ready for this, 500 smart devices. Now, what do I mean by smart devices? I'm talking about your toaster talking to your refrigerator talking to your stove talking to your car, and God knows what they're saying about you. But all these technologies are going to be watching and monitoring and managing and motivating healthy behaviors, ordering food and everything else. And, of course, everything's getting smart. Your car in the future, the autonomous vehicle, is going to be something that we're going to be looking forward to. The idea that just jump in the car, I'm going to show my age now, like George Jetson is just going to take you where you want to go. Now, my background originally is in transportation. My lab has got 5 autonomous vehicles, and we have 30 Teslas out on the nation's roads. By the way, if you ever come to Massachusetts and you see one of my vehicles, run fast. You don't know who's not driving. By the way, don't get too excited. I don't think these vehicles are going to be out on the road for a long time for all of us, not because the technology is not ready. We are not ready. The infrastructure is not ready, nor is public policy necessarily ready. But by the way, let's be really practical. Even if you can use an autonomous vehicle, that's easy. But let's think in terms of real seamless transportation. A person who can't drive due to cognitive or physical issues probably needs help getting into the car and out of the car. So yes, the big trip will be great, but the first 25 feet and the last 25 feet, the engineering community has not solved that one quite yet. How about this one? Who are you going to have lunch with? I love the bear, by the way. Strong social network. Having lunch is one of those great meals because, breakfast, frankly, none of us want to have breakfast with anybody. Nobody wants to see anybody at breakfast. Dinner, maybe, but those tend to be events. But lunch is one of those things where it's a real measure, if you will, of how strong your social network is. I remember interviewing a woman, and it was really nice to be in my 50s, and she said, son, at my age, and she was like about 85, 86, there's a natural attrition to friends. You don't think about it that way, but changes in lifestyle, illness, unfortunately, death, divorce, and the like really does start to change, if you will, the network of people you have around you. And it's not just about having friends, but your parents were right. Remember the whole phrase about birds of a feather flock together? Eating well often is a social activity. I'm going to tell you, I'm half Italian. I believe that food is a major group, but you only eat well when you have lots of people around you. Do you know that older women with higher incomes are likely to suffer from micronutrient deficiency than women that are poor and less educated? Why is that? Well, poorer women tend to have social services intervene. Wealthy women tend to live by themselves and frankly say a wilted piece of lettuce and a bad piece of cheese is, that's good enough, I'll eat it in front of the TV. Having friends, on the other hand, to say, hey, let's get together, let's have a meal, or think about it, for years, and it's typically a woman's role, to make a meal. She rarely was making the meal for her. She was making it for other people. Eating is a social activity. But we're living more and more alone. Look at these numbers. 28% of Canadians, regardless of age, are living by themselves. By the way, these numbers are a little bit misleading. Europe, 31%. That's because the Greeks and the Italians, the Portuguese and the Spanish have their family nearby. Only 27% of their households of one. I don't know what they're doing in Scandinavia, but those numbers go up as high as 56%. In fact, regardless of age, Oslo, Brussels, Munich, and Paris are all more towns with people with more houses over 50% living by themselves than any other place. So living solo is the new demographic feature. If you look around Canada, I'll save you the time here, British Columbia, right here, roughly 29% of British Columbians are living by themselves. And basically, it also skews with income. Income and education, the darker the spot on the map for Canada, the more likely that those are concentrations of households of one. And here, let's look at the United States. By the way, I now have empirical evidence that no one wants to live with anyone in Washington, D.C. 48% of the people down there living by themselves, as they should be. But think about this. The fastest selling shopping cart, have you noticed over recent years, is a small shopping cart. Is it we've all gotten weaker? We can't push a bigger cart? What is this? What's happening is that households of one, you don't need to go essentially into 5 acres of parking lot, into 3 acres of store to buy 1 can of tuna fish. And so you're seeing how the demographics are changing how we're all living. Walmart and the like are creating new urban formats, not just to fit into the cities, but to fit the size of the family. So I'll give an example. As I mentioned, my family's from upstate New York and some on the other side of the river in Ontario. And we had this little bizarre ritual, maybe a few of you grew up with this too. About this time of year, we would go and buy 100 pounds of potatoes, 100 pounds of onions, and 100 pounds of butternut squash and put them in the coal cellar. By the way, I'm an only child. I don't know what we did with this stuff. But we did this. So when I saw them starting to sell potatoes one at a time and barcoded, that really struck me as something weird is going on in society. But that was not bad. This is somewhere between humor and horror. Look at this. Duncan Hines now has birthday cakes for a party of one. So one of the questions you have to ask yourself about retiring well, are we bowling alone? And there's a great book written by Bob Putnam a number of years ago, noted sociologist, and he was looking at data in the United States, and this is true in Canada as well, that entire generation of baby boomers dropped out. What do I mean by dropped out? Now, my grandfather was, Mason. My grandmother was Eastern Star or something like that. My grandparents all belonged to something. The next generation, my generation, we dropped out of Rotary. We dropped out of Kiwanis, Lions, VFWs are vacant. You didn't do school things after the kids graduated. So, and by the way, what Bob Putnam's observation is that Americans, baby boomers, still really like to bowl, but they dropped out of bowling leagues. And so one of the things we have to start thinking about is, what is the strength of your social ties in order to live longer better? And because social ties really predict how well physically and emotionally you'll be. I'll save you from having to read that busy chart. A study was recently released from Brigham Young University that living in isolation and feeling loneliness has the health impact equivalent of smoking 11 to 15 cigarettes per day. So stay social. So I'll give an example. I took this photo at a senior center outside of London. Do you know there's a whole new condition now called wee wrist and wee elbow for playing video games? Older adults are playing with such verve and vigor that they're blowing out ligaments. Now what's really funny, this lady is 93 years old, and after I took the picture, she belted him in the gut, which was an easy target. But that was, doing this. But the fact of the matter is we're seeing a whole new range of ways to get people engaged. This is a system that we developed here. This gentleman is 77 years old. He would not let NBC News videotape him exercising with a device developed in my lab to have him do exercises to improve his driving ability unless he could get my water bottle in the picture. He's better at marketing than I ever could. But the fact of the matter is, he is now doing exercises with friends he's made online in Taiwan and Germany. And they just do different times of the day to exercise. So at least it may be virtual, but at least it's social. And the robots are coming. This is Pepper the robot. I want you to imagine this. There's a whole new cost of retirement none of us have ever thought about. Technology. Many of us would love to retire without Wi-Fi, but it's now become kind of the new normal. This is Pepper the robot. It'll bring you your pills. It'll remind you to take your meds. It'll answer the door. You ready for this? It is programmed to insult you 2 to 3 times a day. Why? Because the makers believe that this is a way of keeping you cognitively in shape by keeping you, shall we say, on your toes. I like this one. This is Holly the robot in Munich. Can do 250 drinks in a half hour. That's how I paid for college, but I don't think that the jokes are probably nearly as good as a real bartender. And then finally, how will you provide care? This is one of the biggest things that we don't think about. 8 million Canadians today are providing care for a family member or a friend. In the United States, it's 1 in 4 American families upwards of spending 26 to 29 hours per week caring for an older adult. And technology is starting to be here. This is called the Granny Pod. Not fond of the name, but the Granny Pod, imagine all those smart technologies and robots put into essentially a modular home, and at the time of need, it's dropped into your backyard for nearly $70,000 to $100,000 US per year. Astronomy numbers. You say, that's kind of crazy. Well, I don't know. Let's do some numbers here in Canada. Independent living. I don't do anything for you. I give you an apartment, and down the street is where you can have care when you need it. Average prices, $1,400 to $3,500 per month. Assisted living. I give you 1 square meal. I may clean out your apartment once a week. Average price, $1,500 to $5,000 per month. Then we get into memory care, $3,000 to $7,000 per month. Start doing the math, and all of a sudden you start to see, gee, Granny Pod, assisted living, independent living, all of a sudden the numbers become very convincing one way or the other that you need to plan ahead. How many of you have been to Japan? How many of you use a smart toilet in Japan? Now, I don't mean, I'm going to keep it clean because we're getting close to dinner now. I'm not talking about those toilets that if you hit the wrong button, as I did the first time I went to Japan, it's like the fountain of youth comes out of the toilet. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a toilet from Panasonic or Toto that, shall we say, downloads from the user your body weight. Did you take your meds? Are you eating what you're not supposed to be eating? And then uploads those data to a call center, doctor's office, nutrition center to guide you in what you should be doing. And by the way, the Brits have now entered the toilet wars. There's a now brand called the VIP toilet in competition with Panasonic and Toto. It is connected in a pilot program to the largest grocery store chain in the UK to facilitate home delivery of the foods that your toilet is deemed missing from your diet. And while your toilet and your toaster may be talking about you, there's actually an experiment going on in Brazil with smart diapers for children, but they think an application can be used for adults where it will tweet to whoever you want that you, your baby, or someone you love needs to be changed. And yes, all of this requires money. It all requires planning. And I wanted to give you 7 questions that had nothing to do with money directly, but had to do with how we live. Retirement is not just a time to sit there and ask what are objectives and to run spreadsheets and charts. It was what Luke was saying earlier, and my friends at Wisdom Tree have discussed as well in the research that we're doing together. It's about quality of life. It's about living longer and living better. Now, on that note, I want to thank all of you for having me, and if we have time for questions, I'd be dynamite to take them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for submitting your questions. I've received a few questions, but if you'd like, go ahead and send further questions as you go. But first questions, these aren't in any particular order, but Dr. Coughlin, the gig economy and work in retirement, what does the studies show? Like, what are your observations and any sort of best practices as people sort of contemplate that?
You know, from what we can see, and there may be a correlation that people are working longer because they can, or they're working longer and it's making them healthy. Without exception, the people that we've seen in surveys in Germany, UK, and the US and Canada, people that are working are happier, better, and more, healthier, and better and more engaged. It's just flat out. By the way, it does not have to be work for money. It can be volunteering with incredible verve as well. But having a sense of purpose and meaning is more important in many cases than almost anything else you can do every morning.
That's good. Another one was a comment, actually. Somebody commented about their father-in-law at an independent retirement living facility. He's one of the few drivers, and said that he's never been as popular as he is now than he was when he was in high school when he was the first to have a car.
I was going to say, we didn't talk about it very much, and this is why I meant it's not going to end well for the guys in the room. Who has the highest divorce rate in the world? What age group? The 50 plus. 90% of those divorces in North America are initiated by whom? Nope. See how loud she was about it? Are you sitting next to anyone? No, not anymore. No, but here's and I got really good Canadian data on this one. What's the reason? Is it sex? Could have been a cool PowerPoint slide. No. Money? We could have had a discussion on that. No. Any guesses? Geez, I hate it when the women get it right on point. Yeah, he bores me was the #1 answer in the United States. But I have to tell you, I always thought the Canadians were the nicer North Americans. You're not nice, you're just passive aggressive. Stats Canada released a survey. You ready for this? Women in Canada did not say he bores me, sex, money. No. He simply ran out of gas was the answer that they gave.
So another question was, and I'll see if I can get this right, but the political implications of aging, like when we look at politics and candidates and what the platforms are, and their policies that they're driving, are voters behind the times? Are voters not pushing this forward? Or is it the politicians themselves not making this a bigger issue? Why are we not?
Leaders are rarely leaders. There's an old saying about a wise politician is someone who sees a protest and excuses himself out of the meeting saying, "Excuse me, I have to get out there in front of and lead my people," because they're already leaving without him. Look, the longevity economy, as I framed it in my book, and look, kind of gave a great intro around it, is about changing the assumption of what old age is and retirement is. We need to have a serious policy discussion about the social contract. And what I mean by the social contract is, think about this. I have 2 daughters. I have empirical evidence that from 0 to 25 years old, there's no return on investment whatsoever. And so we're saying basically you can be off the grid from roughly 0 to 21, and then we're encouraging people to retire at, say, 65 to live at least another 20, 25, 30 years, meaning there's another 20 or 30 years off the grid. That's 50 years, nothing. That's not just not healthy for the individual, but as a matter of society, we need to change the story that we inherited from Bismarck in terms of what politics and policy is about, yes, of course, supporting the most needy, and people who actually worked for a living. I'm talking about bricklayers and iron workers, folks that worked with their body that by the time they were 50, they were broken down. I get paid by driving a keyboard and running off at the mouth. There's no reason for me to retire. Buy software if I can't type anymore. So part of the politicians, we are being short-sighted, but we're being short-sighted because we're being blinded by a dominant paradigm that was written so well and reinforced for a previous generation. It's time for all of us as individuals to tell our leaders it's time for a change and we're ready.
I agree with that. This was a comment about someone who'd done their research. This is about MIT AgeLab's initiatives with Agnes and Miss Daisy. And how are they used and how are they helpful and what are you learning from those?
So Agnes is the Age Gain Now Empathy System, Agnes. By the way, amazing what you can get out of kids when you give them free pizza. They come up with great acronyms like that. But the suit, and it's basically a jumpsuit with weights and pulleys, block and tackle essentially, to weigh the user down. And we've got it calibrated to have you feel about 2 or 3 chronic conditions and to be about between 78 and 82 years old. And no, I do not have a suit to go the other way, because if I did, I wouldn't look like this. But no, so Agnes has been used to redesign, for instance, getting in and out of a car. I forgot whether you have CVS here or not, the drugstore chain in the United States. We redesigned the stores to have lower shelves, shorter shelves, a place particularly for women. You know, the number one buyer in a retail store is a woman. In a drugstore, it's a woman over 60. One of the things that they found when the kids were wearing Agnes was that if you're carrying your purse and everything else, go to the cash register, there's nowhere to put your purse, because you got all the gum, you got People magazine, and there's no place to put the products you're buying in your purse. So Agnes has been used to give designers, engineers, and businesses the aha moment of what it feels like to be an older consumer. By the way, the older consumer in North America controls 70% of discretionary income, and yet we only get 2% of the advertising. So Miss Daisy, the other quick one, is our driving simulator, essentially a $5 million video game to study on how older adults and younger people use, learn, and ultimately trust new technology in the vehicle. The high-tech, high-style, high-priced cars are bought primarily by people over age 55. So all those great new technologies that are going in there, we are the guinea pigs before anybody else is, and we're trying to study how to make those better.
So that's all the questions that we had submitted, but thank you everyone for coming here.
Thank you.
This was fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Coughlin.
Thank you.
And again, for the wonderful people at Wisdom Tree for making this possible. Maybe we'll be able to do this again sometime.
I've always got more to say. Have me back, especially like when the weather's this good. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.